Welcome back to CaliXBoxing 2.0. Like, sub, hit those alerts. And this is volume 1 of the weekly wrap-up. Floyd Kid Austin Schofield headlined for the first time last night and looked impressive against Haskell Rhodes. In the 9th round, Schofield caught a hellacious headbutt to the cheek and continued to fight after licking the blood running down his cheek. And this is my big takeaway from Schofield. There's a vacuum for fighters who simply like to fight and brawl, and he's one of them. He's talented, he's athletic, he can box, but he gets bored in there with the jab and wants to brawl with guys, and there's a market for fighters like that. Look, I'm here to be entertained. I don't need fighters to be perfect. I like fighters who like to fight, and Schofield is one of those fighters who fit that description. Schofield has now transitioned from the prospect phase to the contender phase, and next up looks to be a fight with Jojo Diaz, which would be a fantastic and fun fight. Jojo Diaz erased a 3-fight skid against Jerry Perez last night in a fun fight. And if they make that fight, Diaz will be a good gauge to see where Schofield's at in his career. Hopefully Jojo Diaz can make weight, though. He was well overweight for this fight against Jerry Perez, but the fight still went on, and he still won. Jojo is tons of fun, and I mean that literally. He's fat, but he's fun. Before we get to the meat on the plate, the 147-pound division, let's talk about Diego Pacheco on Friday night. He sent Manuel Gallegos to hell on Friday night. Great execution of going to the body and finishing upstairs. And he's now another guy who's transitioned from the prospect phase to the contender phase. He trains out of that gym with Benavidez out in Seattle. They're about to be joined by Joel Ariarte, who is another guy who's going to be talented in the future. And I'll tell you this, a collision course at 168 at Matchroom seems to be between Pacheco and Berlanga. If they could keep Berlanga from losing, that's a fight they can make in 2024, Mexican-American versus Puerto Rican-American. Much like Benavidez, Pacheco is fun. He's big for the weight, 6'4". Hopefully they move his career more intelligently and quickly than they moved Benavidez's career. Now to the meat on the plate, the 147-pound division. The news was kicked off in the middle of the week when Vergil Ortiz once again fainted in his training camp trying to make weight. Look, it's been evident for a while that Vergil Ortiz can't make 147 comfortably, and now it's evident he can't make 147 at all, and hopefully, and it looks that way, that his team has finally got that through their thick skulls. Rick Marijan and Oscar De La Hoya have said Vergil Ortiz is going to move up to 154 now. It's about time. This is from Dan Rayfield's Substack here. Let me translate it for you. Look, there was no championships committee vote. That doesn't exist. What happened here was Vergil's team called and said, hey, we don't need your mandatory status at 147. We're moving up to 154. Stanionis gets an optional defense. Why does he get an optional defense? Because all of these fighters, Boots Ennis, Vergil Ortiz when he was at 147, Stanionis at 147, are just waiting around for vacant belts to pop open after Bud and Errol fight each other. Finally, we'll have movement in this division, this godforsaken, overrated division where we have 7 undefeated fighters in the top 10. And when Bud and Errol move up to 154 and either Bud or Errol vacate all the belts, guys like Stanionis and Boots Ennis will be sitting pretty as they're elevated to full champions. As far as Vergil goes, he'll be moving up to 154 with the likes of Bud and Errol. Tim Tszyu is sitting there as well. So if Vergil can make the weight at 154 and can reinvigorate his career, a career in which he's only fought once in the past 23 months due to these health issues, there will be some big fights sitting there for him. And being that he looks vulnerable, he'll probably get a good shot, have a good shot of getting those fights. As for Stanionis, I'd love to feel sorry for him and empathetic, and part of me is, but this is what happens when you wait around and take step-aside money instead of forcing bigger fights. It simply is what it is. And it looks like a lot of dudes are hopping off that 147 plane and moving up to 154 at the right time because Boots, that motherfucker, don't look real. And I mean it in a good way. He looked alien-like on Saturday night against Vila. And by the way, quick non-boxing take. Can somebody please get this lady's information and get an interview with her? Because the fact that nobody's landed an interview, nobody knows anything about this woman, it's making me start to believe these conspiracy theories that she saw some sort of reptilian alien on that plane. But back to boxing, Boots is very much a killer. Boots is very much supremely talented, and it's what we said coming into this fight. Vila was going to have more success than the Karen guy that Boots fought in his last fight. However, he was going to get put to sleep because of the style matchup, and Boots was actually going to come out looking better than he did in his last fight. First off, when it comes to Boots' performance, let's be careful with recency bias here, and I have to check myself as well because a lot of us want to crown Boots Ennis as a de facto champion at 147 and already give him the keys to the division. However, there's an undisputed fight happening in 2 weeks between Bud and Errol, and that recency bias will likely change and shift after watching that fight and after we crown an undisputed champion. As of right now, I would still pick Bud Crawford, especially to beat Boots Ennis, but I wouldn't do that confidently because Boots Ennis does look great. Boots Ennis joins that short list of fighters who are great, talented, and could box your ears off, but would rather knock your head off. Some of the other fighters on that list are Naoya Inoue, Bud Crawford, and Junto Nakatani. They can put you to sleep. They are sadistic fighters. That's why I was worried for Vila as the fight went on, and he was losing every round and was too courageous for his own good. It looked like the corner wasn't going to step in, the referee wasn't going to step in, and they didn't. And unfortunately, we got the stoppage in the 10th round because it could have been ended before that. This was a more tame stoppage than Junto Nakatani separating Andrew Maloney from his senses, but it could have became that had Boots landed flush on some of those shots in the 10th round. Referees and trainers in the corner need to do a better job of stepping in when it looks like their fighters are too courageous for their own good and don't have much of a chance to win the fight. I feel like Vila conducted himself well for a guy who lost every round in the fight, and I'd still like to see him against the likes of Roca and Stanionis, the top 10 at the welterweight division. I think those would be fun fights that he could possibly win. The fair criticism of Boots going into Saturday night were, as great and sadistic and entertaining as he is, his career hasn't been taking off, and his career has been like watching paint dry. And that's a lot due to power brokers controlling his career, burying him on undercards such as Tank Davis versus Hector Luis Garcia. Look, nobody puts baby in a corner, and nobody should be putting Boots Ennis on undercards. This guy should be headlining. He should have been headlining by now, and this was a good start and making a 180 in his career on Saturday night. Match him well, putting him in fun, entertaining fights, putting him where the fight belongs, and putting him on a main event. Perception is often reality, and it's not believable that an undercard fighter is cornering the likes of Errol Spence and Bud Crawford and forcing them into fights. Saturday night, Boots Ennis looked like the real deal in every way. Packed auditorium, main event, fun fighter, great boxer. Everything was there. He put everything together, both in and out of the ring. This was the first time in his career he made a, this is my division, I'm the best welterweight in the world type of performance. His predicament is, as soon as he makes this statement, the welterweight division is about to become a lot more shallow. Errol and Bud are about to move up to 154, so is Vergil Ortiz. The biggest fight out there is Emilio Estevez Stanionis, and will he get that fight with Showtime's ability to marinate fights? So it'll be interesting to see if Boots Ennis goes the Paul Williams route or the Gennady Golovkin route. Triple G couldn't get the big fights at middleweight for years, so what he did was he fought at least 3 times per year and mowed down the best competition out there until the big fight finally came to him. Paul Williams and Antonio Margarito couldn't get a fight with Floyd Mayweather and other top fighters at welterweight, so what did they do? They fought each other, and then Paul Williams did not wait around. Even though he had a belt at 147, he moved up to 154 and 160, gave up some of his natural advantages, and got bigger fights up there with the likes of Winky Wright, Sergio Martinez twice, Kermit Cintron, and he was about to land a fight with Canelo Alvarez before being paralyzed in a motorcycle accident. So we're about to find out how badly Boots Ennis wants these big fights, because if he truly wants big fights with Bud Crawford, Errol Spence, he needs to read the writing on the wall and not only follow those guys up there, but even beat them to 154. And oh, by the way, a budding superstar in Tim Tszyu is already up at 154. Those are where the big fights will develop sooner than later. Does Boots continue to wait around for the vacant belts to pop up? And he'll likely join the likes of O'Shaquie Foster, Regis Prograis as guys who will still struggle to get unification fights in their division because the risk simply doesn't meet the reward yet. Regardless, Saturday night was a good start. Continue to have this guy fight where the fights make sense. Continue to have him on main events. Continue to have people exposed to him because this dude should be a star. He's got everything. CaliXBoxing, Volume 1, weekend wrap-up. Hope you've enjoyed.